The Barge family, that should die under the jail. All being protected by Clive Davis. I wonder why.
Hold up, because this revelation just took the internet into dangerous territory. Jaguar Wright is back in the spotlight, and this time she's claiming that what 50 Cent removed from the Diddy documentary is far worse than anything the public has seen so far. According to Jaguar, certain footage and details were allegedly too disturbing, too incriminating, and too explosive to be released without shaking the entire industry. And when she said it, the room went quiet. Fans immediately started asking why 50 Cent would delete anything at all, unless it crossed a line nobody wanted exposed. Social media is spiraling, old clips are resurfacing, and people are questioning whether the truth is being slowly edited away to protect powerful names. If even half of what Jaguar is implying is real, then what was removed might be the most horrifying part of the story. Buckle up, this gets dark fast. The moment Jaguar Wright opened her mouth again, the internet knew it wasn't about to be light work. Jaguar doesn't tease, she doesn't hint softly, she drops verbal grenades and walks away while everyone else scrambles to make sense of the blast. And this time, her target wasn't just Sean Combs, it was what she claims was removed from the documentary tied to 50 Cent. According to Jaguar, what the public didn't see is far worse than what they did. That single statement flipped the entire conversation. Because the moment someone says deleted footage, especially in a case already surrounded by controversy, people stop asking what was shown and start obsessing over what was hidden. Jaguar claimed that certain details were allegedly cut because they were too disturbing, too damaging, and too revealing, not just for one person, but for the entire industry ecosystem surrounding Diddy. And once that claim hit social media, the tone shifted instantly. This wasn't gossip anymore, this felt like a warning. Jaguar didn't provide documents, she didn't show clips, she didn't name every detail explicitly. But what she did do was describe the nature of what she says was removed. And her description alone was enough to unsettle even people who thought they were already desensitized. She implied the deleted material allegedly involved patterns of behavior, environments, and situations that would have forced the public to reframe everything they thought they knew about power, protection, and silence in the music industry. She said it wasn't just scandalous, it was sickening. Her words, not evidence, but words carry weight when spoken with certainty. And people immediately asked the obvious question, why would 50 Cent delete anything at all? To fans, 50 Cent has built a reputation as someone who exposes, not protects. Someone who enjoys pulling the curtain back, not closing it. So Jaguar's claim created cognitive dissonance. Either the material didn't meet legal standards for release, or it was so explosive that even exposure came with consequences. That uncertainty lit the fuse. Online, people started replaying old interviews, lives, and rants from Jaguar where she had made similar claims about the industry years ago, claims that were once dismissed as erratic or exaggerated. But now, with multiple scandals surrounding Diddy already public, some viewers started reconsidering her credibility. They began saying things like, she'd been saying this for years, maybe she wasn't lying just early. This industry really protects monsters. Others pushed back hard, reminding everyone that allegations without proof can destroy lives and that Jaguar has made extreme claims before. The internet split, believers versus skeptics, and both sides dug in. Meanwhile, silence from 50 Cent became a story in itself. No clarification, no denial, no confirmation. And once again, silence became a canvas for speculation. People theorized that the alleged deletions weren't about protecting Diddy, but about protecting platforms, legal boundaries, and third parties who could be implicated indirectly. Because documentaries don't exist in a vacuum, lawyers, distributors, insurers, and networks all have a say in what airs and what doesn't. Jaguar, however, framed it differently. She suggested that the deleted content crossed a moral line, not just a legal one. That showing it would have forced accountability in ways the industry isn't ready for. And when she said that, the temperature changed. Because if true, that means the public conversation is only scratching the surface. This is where things get uncomfortable. Jaguar has repeatedly claimed that abuse of power in the music industry isn't isolated, it's systemic. That silence isn't accidental, it's enforced. And that the reason certain stories never fully come out isn't because they aren't real, but because too many people benefit from them staying buried. Again, claims, not proof. But the reason her words landed this time is timing. The culture is already questioning power structures. People are already suspicious of how long certain rumors went unchecked. So when Jaguar says, "What you didn't see was worse," it resonates not because it's verified, but because it fits a pattern people are already primed to believe exists. And once belief enters the chat, facts struggle to keep up. Social media did what it always does next. It exaggerated. TikTok creators dramatized her statements. YouTube thumbnails used words like horrifying and unwatchable. Twitter threads speculated wildly, layering assumptions on top of assumptions until the original claim was almost unrecognizable. Some people went too far, treating speculation as confirmation. Others warned against exactly that, because there's a dangerous line between holding powerful people accountable and turning unverified claims into accepted truth. And that line gets blurred fast when outrage fuels engagement. What we do know is this: documentaries are edited for many reasons. Legal exposure is real, defamation laws are strict, and not everything filmed can be shown. But Jaguar isn't talking about boring legal edits. She's talking about content that allegedly reveals something rotten at the core. Whether that's true or not remains unproven, but the claim itself has already changed the narrative. Now the question isn't just what did Diddy...
They didn't.
That's the thing. They didn't portray her at all. She was spoken for by Kalima. That was interesting to watch. You don't think? Kalima's testimony?
Diddy do? It's what does the industry refuse to show? And that question is bigger than any one documentary. Jaguar Wright may be exaggerating, she may be speculating, she may be misinformed, or she may be voicing something others are afraid to say out loud. Right now, the public doesn't know. All they know is that something was cut, and once people believe something was hidden, trust evaporates. This isn't the end of the story, it's the opening of a darker chapter. Because once the idea of deleted truth exists, every future release will be questioned. And that is exactly why this claim, whether true or not, is so explosive. Once Jaguar Wright's claims settled into the bloodstream of social media, the conversation shifted from shock to suspicion. People weren't just reacting anymore, they were reassessing everything they thought they knew. Because when someone says content was deleted, especially content tied to power, the immediate assumption is that truth was edited out. And that assumption is dangerous. The first thing people questioned was why Jaguar's words were landing harder this time. Years ago, similar statements from her were dismissed as exaggerations or personal grievances. But now, the cultural climate is different. Audiences are more aware of how long abuse allegations can stay buried, how systems protect powerful figures, and how whistleblowers are often ignored until it's too late. So instead of laughing her off, people leaned in. They started connecting dots not with evidence but with history, old industry rumors, past interviews. Stories that once sounded unbelievable now felt disturbingly plausible. And that's how credibility gets retroactively assigned, not through proof but through timing. People asked, what if she wasn't wrong just early? That question alone revived years of ignored commentary. At the center of it all sat 50 Cent's silence. Not a tweet, not a joke, not a denial. And for someone known to speak loudly, especially when controversy circles, that quiet felt intentional. Silence doesn't automatically mean agreement, but it does invite interpretation. And interpretation is the internet's favorite playground. Some viewers believed the lack of response meant legal constraints. Documentaries are bound by contracts, insurance clauses, and defamation laws. Showing unverified or graphic content can shut down entire projects. In that sense, cutting footage could be about responsibility, not protection. But others weren't convinced. They argued that if material was truly explosive morally, not just legally, then editing it out maintains the same cycle Jaguar claims exists. Silence disguised as caution. That's where the narrative split sharply. On one side, you can't show everything that's reality. On the other, if you don't show it, you're complicit. And that debate escalated fast. TikTok creators began theorizing about what kind of content would be too terrible to air. That speculation alone pushed boundaries, with some users going far beyond what was ever claimed. This is where things became risky. Imagination started replacing facts, and shock value replaced responsibility. Jaguar never described specific acts in detail, but the internet did, filling in blanks with its darkest assumptions. And that's when the conversation became less about accountability and more about sensationalism. That's the paradox of leaks without leaks. When no evidence is shown, people invent their own evidence mentally. And once the imagination runs free, reality struggles to pull it back. Still, one thing Jaguar tapped into effectively was the idea of pattern. She didn't frame her claim as a one-off scandal, but as part of a broader system of power and silence. That framing resonated with audiences already skeptical of how industries protect their own. People began asking larger questions. Who decides what the public sees? Who decides what's too much? And who benefits when stories are softened? Those questions go beyond Diddy, beyond 50 Cent. They point at the machinery behind media networks, lawyers, advertisers, platforms, all of whom have stakes in what narratives survive. But questioning systems is different from accusing individuals. And that distinction began to blur as the story spread. Some people treated Jaguar's words as confirmation, not commentary. They spoke in absolutes. This proves everything. We already know. They're all guilty. That leap is exactly where misinformation thrives. Others pushed back hard, reminding audiences that allegations without evidence can destroy lives and derail legitimate investigations. That truth matters too, because once public opinion convicts someone before facts do, justice becomes impossible. Meanwhile, Jaguar doubled down not with proof but with tone. She spoke with urgency, frustration, and emotion. That emotional delivery convinced some viewers she was speaking from lived experience, not speculation. Emotion feels authentic, even when it isn't verifiable, but emotion alone cannot replace evidence. This is where the story becomes less about what was deleted and more about why audiences are so quick to believe something terrible was hidden. The answer lies in trust, or the lack of it. People don't trust industries anymore. They don't trust that powerful figures are held accountable. They don't trust that documentaries tell the full story. So when someone says you didn't see the worst part, it fits an existing belief. That truth is always watered down. That belief may sometimes be justified, but it's also easily exploited. Jaguar's claim doesn't exist in a vacuum. It thrives in a culture already primed to assume concealment. And that's why her words exploded, even without receipts. At the same time, silence from those involved, Diddy, 50 Cent production teams, allowed speculation to run unchecked. In the absence of clarity, the loudest voices dominate. And the loudest voices are rarely the most careful. Now the conversation sits at a crossroads. Either evidence emerges, shifting the story from speculation to fact, or the claim fades into the archive of unresolved internet controversies. But even if it fades, it leaves a mark, because trust once shaken doesn't fully reset. Audiences will now watch every future documentary with suspicion. They'll ask what was cut, what was softened, what was omitted. That skepticism isn't necessarily bad, but when fueled by unverified claims, it can distort reality. The danger here isn't that Jaguar spoke. The danger is what happens after people stop asking for proof, because accountability requires facts, justice requires verification, and truth requires patience. Without those, outrage becomes noise, loud, consuming, and ultimately unproductive. This story isn't finished, but it's already changed how people view exposés. The idea that something worse always exists off camera has taken hold. And once that idea exists, it reshapes how audiences consume information forever. The question now isn't just what was deleted, it's how easily belief fills the gaps where evidence is missing. At this stage, the story is no longer just about Jaguar Wright, 50 Cent, or Sean Combs. It's about something much bigger, the psychology of hidden truth. Because once people believe there is something they are not being allowed to see, curiosity turns into obsession. And obsession doesn't need proof. The idea that the worst part was deleted activates a very specific response in the human mind. It tells people what you saw was controlled. And once that seed is planted, everything else becomes suspect. Viewers start questioning not only this documentary, but every exposé they've ever watched. What else was cut? Who decided what crossed the line? And most importantly, who was protected by those decisions? This is where Jaguar's words became more powerful than any footage ever could have been. She didn't need to show anything. She didn't need to leak files. She didn't need receipts. All she needed to do was convince people that something existed beyond the frame. And once people believe that, imagination takes over. The internet began treating the unseen as more real than the seen. What wasn't shown became more important than what was. That's a dangerous shift, because when imagination fills the gaps, it tends to go darker than reality. People don't imagine mild omissions, they imagine horrors. That's why this narrative escalated so quickly. People weren't debating facts anymore. They were debating possibilities, and possibilities don't require accountability. Anyone can claim the unseen was terrible, evil, or unwatchable, because there's no way to disprove something that allegedly never made it to air. This is where speculation starts to undermine real accountability. Because if everything terrible is always hidden, then nothing that is shown feels sufficient. Evidence is dismissed as incomplete, verified reporting is brushed off as sanitized, and suddenly no amount of documented fact satisfies the hunger for outrage. That's a dangerous place to land. It also puts creators like 50 Cent in an impossible position. On one hand, documentaries have legal, ethical, and moral boundaries. They can't air unverified accusations. They can't expose third parties without due process. They can't show graphic material without considering harm. Editing is not inherently censorship, it's part of responsible storytelling. But once someone claims you removed content because it was too terrible, the public stops assuming responsibility and starts assuming concealment. And that assumption sticks. People online began framing 50 Cent's role not as a producer navigating legal constraints, but as a gatekeeper deciding what truth the public could handle. That's a heavy accusation, even if no one says it directly. It floats in the air, implied but unproven, and implication is powerful. Meanwhile, Jaguar's supporters argued that systems have historically buried truths under the label of too much. They pointed to past scandals that were ignored for years before exploding publicly. In that context, her claim felt less like fantasy and more like a warning. Her critics, on the other hand, argued that she has a history of making extreme statements without substantiation, and that repeating them without evidence risks destroying credibility and causing collateral damage. Both sides had a point, and that's what makes this situation so volatile. It lives in the grey area between mistrust of power and the need for proof. The internet, however, is not comfortable with grey areas. It wants villains and heroes. Truth or lie, exposed or covered up. Nuance doesn't trend, certainty does. So the narrative hardened. People began speaking as if the deleted content definitely existed and definitely proved something horrific. They talked about it with confidence, not caution. At that point, the story detached completely from verification and became belief-driven. That's when accountability conversations derail. Because real accountability requires evidence that can stand up to scrutiny, not assumptions built on what might have been hidden. When speculation replaces proof, powerful people don't get held responsible, they get insulated by chaos. Everything becomes noise, and noise drowns facts. Ironically, this kind of speculation can protect the very systems people are trying to challenge. Why? Because without evidence, nothing moves forward legally or structurally. Public outrage burns hot but fast, then disappears without consequence. Meanwhile, serious issues get buried under exaggerated claims that can't be substantiated. That's the risk of terrible deleted footage narratives. They feel explosive, but they often lead nowhere. Another layer here is trauma. Jaguar speaks with visible pain and anger. Many viewers interpret that as authenticity, and sometimes it is. Trauma can make people speak urgently, emotionally, and broadly. But trauma can also blur lines between personal experience and generalized accusation. That doesn't make someone a liar, but it does mean their words need careful handling. The internet is not careful. It takes trauma and turns it into content. It takes pain and turns it into proof. It rewards the most shocking interpretation because shock drives engagement. And once that machine starts, it doesn't stop to ask who gets hurt along the way. Now the story is in a dangerous holding pattern. No evidence has surfaced. No footage has leaked. No documents have appeared. But belief has already solidified for some viewers, and belief is resistant to correction. If nothing further emerges, this will eventually fade, but not cleanly. It will linger as an unresolved "what if" referenced whenever similar stories arise. Remember when Jaguar said, "will become a footnote in future conversations." If evidence does emerge one day, the conversation will explode again, and everything said now will be revisited, reinterpreted, and rejudged. Either way, the damage to trust is already done. Audiences are now conditioned to assume that what they see is incomplete, that every exposé hides something worse, that truth is always partially concealed. That assumption may sometimes be justified, but when applied universally, it erodes the ability to distinguish real accountability from rumor-driven outrage. And that's the real danger here, not that Jaguar spoke. Not that people questioned edits, But that speculation has started replacing evidence as the standard for belief. When that happens, truth doesn't win, confusion does. This story is approaching its final phase. The shock has worn off. The theories are repeating. The conversation is circling itself. What remains is the lingering discomfort, the feeling that something is wrong, even if no one can prove what that something is. And that discomfort will shape how people view future revelations, for better or worse. Because once you believe truth is always hidden, you stop trusting anything you can actually verify. This is where the story slows down, not because it's resolved, but because it has reached the edge of what speculation alone can carry. After days of debate, outrage, theories, and emotionally charged commentary, the narrative around Jaguar Wright's claim has arrived at its most uncomfortable truth. Nothing new has actually been proven, and that realization is unsettling for an internet that thrives on certainty. At this point, the conversation is no longer fueled by fresh information. It's fueled by belief. People are arguing positions they've emotionally committed to, not facts they can verify. And when belief replaces verification, the story stops moving forward and starts looping. That's exactly where we are now. Jaguar Wright has said her piece. She has implied that what was deleted from the documentary was terrible, too much, and unfit for public consumption. She hasn't released footage, she hasn't produced documents. She hasn't named specific, verifiable events. And yet, the impact of her words has already rippled far beyond what evidence normally allows. Why? Because the idea of hidden truth is more powerful than exposed truth. Once people believe something is being concealed, every absence becomes suspicious. Every edit becomes intentional. Every silence becomes strategic. And that belief doesn't need confirmation to survive, it feeds on distrust alone. This is where the story turns inward. It stops being about Diddy. It stops being about 50 Cent. It even stops being about Jaguar Wright. It becomes about the audience, about how quickly we assume the worst, about how easily we fill gaps with imagination, about how comfortable we are treating implication as confirmation. The claim that something worse exists off-camera creates an endless loop. If no proof appears, believers say it's because the system buried it. If proof does appear, they say it confirms everything they already believed. Either way, the belief is protected from contradiction. That's not accountability, that's ideology. And ideology doesn't change based on facts. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that it blurs the line between healthy skepticism and destructive suspicion. Questioning power is necessary. Demanding accountability is important. But assuming guilt without evidence doesn't dismantle systems, it muddies them. When everything is treated as a cover-up, nothing can be properly investigated. This is the paradox at the center of this story. If Jaguar is right and something truly horrific was cut, then the public deserves to know through evidence, due process, and responsible exposure. But if the claim remains unsupported, then amplifying it endlessly risks harming real people, discrediting real issues, and exhausting public trust. And that's where things begin to fracture. Some viewers are now backing away, saying, "Until I see proof, I'm done speculating." Others are digging in deeper, convinced that the absence of proof is the proof. The divide grows wider, not because new facts emerged, but because people are reacting to the idea of secrecy itself. Meanwhile, the documentary, the actual content that sparked this, has almost faded into the background. The focus has shifted entirely to what wasn't shown, what wasn't said, what might exist somewhere unseen. That's a powerful lesson in media psychology. What's visible can be analyzed, what's invisible can be mythologized, and myths don't require accountability. This is also where responsibility comes into play, not just for creators, but for consumers. Documentaries are not courtrooms, commentary is not testimony, and emotion, while real, is not evidence. When audiences blur those lines, they unintentionally weaken the very causes they believe they're supporting. Because real justice depends on facts that can stand scrutiny, not narratives that collapse when challenged. As of now, there are only 3 possible paths forward for this story. 1. Evidence emerges. Concrete, verifiable material that moves the conversation from speculation to accountability. This would radically change everything, but until that happens, it remains hypothetical. 2. Silence continues. No footage, no clarification, no follow-up. The story slowly fades, leaving behind suspicion but no resolution. This is the most likely outcome in internet culture. 3. The narrative mutates. The claim becomes a reference point in future discussions, resurfacing whenever similar scandals arise, not as proof, but as an unresolved remember when. None of these paths provide closure, they only shift how the story is remembered. And that's the final uncomfortable truth. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with tension, with doubt, with unresolved questions that linger longer than facts ever could. This doesn't mean nothing happened. It doesn't mean something definitely did. It means the internet reached the limit of what it can know without evidence. And that limit matters, because once speculation reaches saturation, continuing to push it doesn't expose truth, it dilutes it. It turns serious conversations about abuse, power, and accountability into background noise that people eventually tune out. That's the real cost here, not just reputational damage, not just public confusion, but the erosion of credibility around real issues that deserve careful, factual attention. If the industry truly has dark corners, and history suggests many do, then exposing them requires precision, not panic. Courage, not conjecture. Evidence, not implication. Until that happens, this story exists in limbo, powerful, unsettling, unresolved, and maybe that's the point. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't what's hidden, it's what people are willing to believe without seeing. Now it's over to you, because this story doesn't sit easy with anyone. Do you believe Jaguar Wright is exposing something the industry doesn't want the public to see? Or do you think claims without evidence only create fear, confusion, and distraction from real accountability? Should documentaries show everything, no matter how disturbing, or is there a line that shouldn't be crossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is bigger than one documentary and bigger than one person. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because if any receipts surface, if anyone breaks silence, or if this story takes another turn, you already know we'll be back immediately to break it all down, step by step. The truth always has a way of resurfacing, and when it does, you don't want to miss it. Teacup Fire.